Okay, thank you, Cricket. So the first question, actually, you've already uh, said a little bit, but can you elaborate a little bit more about yourself, your current role, and what brought you to work with this organization?
Yeah, so my current role as the scattered site housing supervisor with the Department of Homelessness and Supportive Housing really works with housing individuals in units in the private rental market. So programs that I oversee are flexible housing subsidy pool, the rapid rehousing programs, housing ladder, which moves individuals out of PSH into independent housing units. And then I also oversee like housing choice vouchers, which is a type of Section 8 housing voucher that's in, the scattered site private rental market. I previous to this role or prior to this role, I was working in rapid rehousing. So I managed two programs. One was serving individuals exiting the criminal justice system. And then another rapid rehousing program for single adults. So was overseeing all of those programs. And the difference between rapid rehousing is it's a temporary or a time limited subsidy. Can be either a set amount every month, or it can be a gradual decline in the rental subsidy. And then the individual will contribute more over time. And then there's also permanent subsidies as well. I've been working in this field for, at least in the scattered site housing, like I said, for about 3 years, but overall, I think more than a decade serving this community. So, yeah.
Wow, that's amazing. 10 years is a long time.
It is.
That's wonderful.
I'm curious about the housing choice voucher. Like, can you dive into that a little bit more? That sounds interesting.
Yeah, if anybody has seen any, I think back in May or June, the mayor announced, the emergency housing vouchers that were released by, I think it was the Rescue Act or Rescue Plan that came out, the most recent one. With that, the Biden administration released about 70,000 housing choice vouchers, or referred to as emergency housing vouchers. So they're essentially Section 8 vouchers. They're slightly different as they're targeted to individuals that are homeless, at risk of homelessness, recently homeless, or fleeing domestic violence. And San Francisco was awarded 906. So there's also mainstream vouchers. So it's a Section 8 voucher, but it's a subsidy that's used in the private rental market. So when the client that holds the voucher, once they actually sign the lease with the landlord, and then HUD or the housing authority will pay that rent, and the client pays 30% of their income towards the rent.
Wow.
And that is a flat standard across San Francisco, is that 30% rent.
And what's the duration like?
A permanent.
Oh, permanent?
Yeah.
Awesome. So there's no time limit.
Nope. Not for those. Typically a Section 8 voucher is permanent. You have to do an annual recertification, meaning you just have to provide income verification annually, or if there's a significant change in the income, you do have to provide that, or else you're still going to have to pay the same amount. One thing that's slightly, with all of the programs is you do have to be a permanent resident to be able to access the Section 8 vouchers. So unlike some of the other programs that I mentioned earlier, like flexible housing subsidy pool or rapid rehousing, depending on the funding source, those can house individuals that don't have permanent residency. So those Section 8 vouchers do have to have that.
Oh, awesome. Okay. And I guess we can look more into that later with my group. So next question, Cricket, what is your definition of homelessness? I know that there's different terminologies for homelessness too. We heard that we should be using unhoused people, or is it okay to use homeless? Sorry, that's a lot of questions there. So first question, what is your definition of homelessness and what is the correct terminology to use?
Oh, I would agree that there are a lot of, I think I recently heard unhoused neighbors, right? So that is a new one that I've recently heard buzz about. When speaking, just say individuals experiencing homelessness is typically how I refer to them, or to someone that is experiencing homelessness. But yeah, I think a lot of times I have to refer to the HUD definition of homelessness, literal homelessness. So there are different types of like literal homelessness versus like the doubled up or the couch surfing, things like that. So really trying to make a distinction between literal homelessness versus someone who's couch surfing or accessing some type of I would say unstable housing or is housing that is not permanent. So, but yeah.
So you said the HUD, to refer to the HUD definition?
That's what I would do.
Okay.
If I was working on a project, or as I am now, still tonight after I finish this interview, I will be referring to the HUD definition for most things. San Francisco, I think, also has a slightly different definition of homelessness that we use for like our problem solving and our coordinated entry. But it's very similar.
Okay, perfect. Do you know a little bit about the history of homelessness in San Francisco specifically?
So when I moved here in 2015 and I was getting my grad degree as well, I think I had memorized the point in time count. So I'm, familiar with the number of homelessness, that it's done a fairly good job at like being able to flatline, whereas surrounding communities has increased or decreased, mainly increased. And San Francisco's has been able to kind of maintain that same number. It's, I think, increased or decreased throughout different populations. Like we've seen a pretty good decrease within youth, increase, I think, in single adults, but there's been a fairly large focus on both families and youth over the years to really try and make a lot of effort and advocate for housing for those populations. So to me, I've continuously seen kind of with the single adult population, a continued increase, or at least a steady number across that population. And then as for like, if you're asking in history as to like why homelessness is happening, there's, a number of different reasons, as in like you go all the way back to the Ellis Act. And the eviction, so homeowners could increase their rent once those all started to increase. But yeah.
Okay.
That's one thing I don't think you can Google a lot of history on San Francisco's homelessness. It's not always the case with some other communities. I'm originally from Kansas City, and it's not as easy to find history on the homelessness issue that they're having. So,
and we've noticed that San Francisco also has a lot of resources for the homeless community. And I'm sure that not many other states also have as many resources as San Francisco, but they also have a high population as well. So it makes sense.
You feel like there's like a particular subpopulation within the homeless population in San Francisco that's like at greater risk, or maybe there's like different trending that's been happening over time? Because you mentioned like single adults and youths, but just curious to know if you feel like there's like a particular population that's more or less impacted by homelessness like in terms of like demographics?
More or less impacted, I would say yes. Like you can just look at the numbers and you can see that honestly, single male adults is the highest number of homelessness, right? It's been the highest for the longest time. And honestly, I'm often puzzled why there are so many limited resources towards the single adult male across demographic, no matter, what demographic that is, or race or ethnicity. You see that number in across the state, even you'll see that number be higher than families or youth, or even single women. Now, some people might argue with you that single women, you can work as a sex worker, or you can have, a partner that you're living with, but it's not your housing. And so that is technically not stable housing because you could lose it at any point. And it also really creates sometimes an unstable relationship as well, and some domestic violence situations. But ultimately, when we look at the numbers, we see a lot of single adult men, filtering through the system. Yeah, so I think that to me has always kind of been slightly puzzling as to why we don't but you'll never see a program say, I'm going to focus on single adult men. So unless it's like a single building, like a PSH building that can only have men in it, like a criminal justice system building, I think has like a floor that's all men. It's like the only time I've ever seen it. But I mean, there is good reason for that, right? Families. So like if somebody asks me like, I think the most common question I ever get is like, how do you solve homelessness? Honestly, it's by education, right? In lower income communities, poverty driven areas. It's like providing, a better ground base for them, right? And so it's through education. It starts at that young age. We see so much generational homelessness that if we can really kind of prevent it before it even starts, we'll have a better shot at years down the road seeing that number increase. So it makes sense to really focus on families, as there's many youth that are living in cars or shelters or even on the street. So it makes sense.
That does make sense. And that brings me to my next question. What would you say are the greatest needs? And so you already elaborated a little bit on that, on how what they need. But to change this question a little bit, what would you say are the greatest needs right now as a homeless single man out in San Francisco? I don't know if you've encountered one, or maybe your organization has, right? Like, what are they expressing? What are their needs right now?
I think I was, if I was to talk to a homeless male right now, they would, just actually probably just state their basic needs, right?
Housing.
Maslow's, yep. Well, Maslow's hierarchy of needs is just like food, water, shelter. I mean, we're going even below. I mean, if you walk out on the streets, we're going below even housing, right? They're not even all the time asking for housing. They're just asking to use the bathroom some of the time. Like there are many places, like when I was doing direct service work, I had a client come to my office because they had peed their pants because the Pete's Coffee or Starbucks or whatever it was wouldn't let them use the bathroom. And then they ended up, urinating on themselves. So it's like, it's not even as much as housing at this point. Sometimes it's just that a clean pair of socks, some water, some food, a place to go to the bathroom or shower. So, you have to take care of those like basic needs before you can even work on like those next steps up, and getting to that community and belonging and building self-efficacy and things like that. So, when I try and think of like housing and getting someone where they need to go, I often think of like Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
Wow. Okay. So these are really, really basic needs. That was really interesting to hear you say that, you know, they are looking to just use something simple as a bathroom. And you said clean socks and a shower. Are there places in San Francisco where these people can go and shower other than shelters? Let's say they just need a
Yeah.
shower.
Laza May, forgive me if that is not the right name. There's like this, it can move around shower system. Lava May, maybe.
Lava
Maybe
May.
I'm very wrong. Does that sound right to people?
It sounds right. I can Google it.
Okay. Yeah.
It sounds
I
right
think
in
I'm a
Spanish,
Googler.
like lava me, like shower me.
Yeah, okay, so I'm pretty sure that's what it's like a showers on a trailer. I actually think they're parked at some of the safe sleep sites that are one out in front of Civic Center, if you've seen it. They have like a trailer with showers and toilets and stuff. So but other than that, outside of for showering, there's not too many places to shower outside of the shelters. And then even then, when you shower in the shelters, they're, you know, it's not very many, takes a long time. You have to be out by a certain time. There's a lot of barriers even to being able to get the shower. So sometimes they'll get up super early, like at 4 or 5 in the morning, just so they can get a shower before
Oh, wow.
before breakfast and then get out the door.
It's like a first come first serve basis. Like you just
Mhm.
sign up for a spot. Okay.
Some of them are communal showers, depending on which building it is, or which shelter it is. Some of them are community showers as well. So
Okay.
but then I'm pretty sure you have to bring your own towel too. I'm trying to remember that far back. I haven't been to the shelter in a couple of years.
Okay. Thank you, Cricket. So I'm going to change the topic a little bit here, just a tad bit. What is the process to evaluating a client's needs?
What is the process to evaluating the client's needs? Are you referring, I mean, San Francisco's, like we have coordinated entry, so I can tell you about the coordinated entry assessment
Yes.
and how we
Okay.
kind of evaluate that based on housing needs. But then also like just in general, a lot of our providers, like when it comes to programs and when a client is referred to a program, then they assess the client needs based on like onboarding and intake paperwork and asking basic questions and then establishing like a housing stability plan. And then that's where they work on like their goals and referrals to mental health services or food or anything that they might need outside of just a roof over their head. So that's kind of that process. But then getting referred, assessing the need, at least for housing, is done through coordinated entry, through a primary coordinated entry assessment, which is, I think it's a 17 question assessment that really just goes through like asking individuals about their current housing situation, a little bit about their history, where they've been homeless, how long. So really just kind of asks them questions about their current state and then their history. And then based on those answers, it also asks some questions about, if I remember correctly, it asks some questions about being able to like find food and basic hygiene activities as well. And so it kind of asks about that and behavioral health diagnosis as well. Trying to think of all of them, but and then based on those questions, a score is provided, and then it depends on the score. It can be banded at sometimes. So if they get between a certain number, then they're referred to one program. If they get a different score, then they'll be referred to a different program. So it's kind of based on that.
Awesome. What are you currently working on? I know that you mentioned right after this, you're going to still continue to work, and can you share a little bit about that, your current project?
Yeah, I would love to. 1 second. So I actually am very busy at the moment. So SIP hotels are SIP rehousing inside demobilization. I'm guessing you guys are familiar with this.
Just a little bit.
Yes, just a little bit. I feel like my world is consumed by this right now. So when people don't know about it, I'm like, what? So during the pandemic, we housed, we as in San Francisco housed, I think at one point it was close to 2,200, maybe more, individuals that were COVID vulnerable in the SIP hotels. So COVID vulnerable is 60 or older and having a pre-existing like medical condition that made you more susceptible to COVID. And so the mayor announced last year, I think in November, that everyone that was currently living in the SIP hotels would have a permanent exit to housing. So there's been a lot of work done to be able to come up with around, I think I have to look at the math there. I think there's around 750 permanent subsidies, and then I think 350 rapid rehousing subsidies, and then there's prevention dollars, and then short-term subsidies as well. So like there's a lot that's gone into rehousing the individuals so they don't go back to the street. They actually have a dry, warm place to go to. So the programs I'm overseeing are rehousing people in the SIP sites. So I'm working on that. And then I oversee the emergency housing vouchers that are working on being implemented. And really, I think the big picture for this, and just like something that as the supervisor of all these programs coming online, is like, how or where do they all fit in? Like it's the first time in a long time that San Francisco has had this many resources. In the past, it's often just been permanent supportive housing or problem solving, which is a unique intervention. And if you don't know about it, Google it. Or problem solving. So it's a lot in the past has been one or the other, unless there are rapid rehousing slots that are available, but they were limited. So now we have coming online, we have more permanent supportive housing coming online. We have flexible housing subsidy pool coming online. We have rapid rehousing coming online. We have some transitional housing, at least for TAY. And then we also have like interim shelter as well, right? So we have all of these, I feel like I'm forgetting something, but we have all of them coming online, and just trying to think through like, how do these each fit together, and what's the best method of getting the right housing intervention to the person that needs that intervention. Like matching the person to the intervention is like this real strategy that we're trying to like work through right now, because you don't want to give someone that is capable of being employed, that is capable of being independent, a permanent subsidy where someone else might have mental health barriers or just basic ADL needs, that they can't live on their own, or successfully live independently or afford their rent independently, to get a time limited subsidy when really they need a permanent subsidy, or so just trying to match that correct subsidy.
Wow, that's amazing, Cricket. I did hear a little bit about that during COVID. The hotels opened up for people who needed to quarantine but didn't have a safe place to do that. So the hotels opened up. And so now you're saying that they opened up for older adults who are at risk for COVID, right?
They've been open for people that are at risk of COVID. Yeah.
Okay, I see. Oh, wow. Okay.
That were homeless, right? They didn't have a safe place to stay,
Mhm.
right? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Can I ask you a question?
Yes.
What are you all thinking about doing for your project?
So we were just, our main topic, our population are people who are homeless in San Francisco with behavioral health problems, with behavioral health needs. We still don't know the intervention that we want to do. Your second interview, the first person who we interviewed did mention that there's a lot of resources, but some of the needs are basic, like using a bathroom and showering. So that was really nice to hear you also say the same thing, because we're matching 2 and 2. So that's something we're thinking of, and also taking the behavioral health approach of having a mobile van go all over San Francisco doing giving behavioral health counseling, and then having a care coordinator connecting them with the resources that they may need, and then also have a shower available for them, and then a small little kit with clean socks, water, feminine hygiene products if they need that. But listening to you talk makes me wonder, can we also somehow help with those efforts and those needs, right? Our imaginary project.
It's
But it
fun.
connects. It's fun to think and imagine. To also, what you were saying, connecting these people with those vouchers. How can we identify these people and connect the right people who really need that?
Mhm.
So I'm thinking of a care coordinator. I don't know what the rest of my teammates are thinking, but I'm thinking of building a collaboration with multiple community partners and assessing who needs what and directing them to those resources.
So it kind of reminds me, Cricket, do you know about Alameda County Care Connect?
I feel like I've heard of them. Yeah.
It's like they have a community health record where they provide they like connect people to all these different services within Alameda County, like legal services, housing, behavioral health services. And I'm wondering if there's anything, and I'm sure there's something similar like that in San Francisco, but it's like, providing whole person care. And I feel like that's kind of the direction we're taking our program in. And I'm sure there's something like that in San Francisco, but I haven't come across anything yet. But if you know something, I'm totally open to hearing about that.
All they do is connect people to services.
So it's a pilot. They have a community health record where people come to the county and for specific services, and there's like 10 different organizations that are part of it. And basically with this health record, they're able to understand like the status of people in terms of like mental health or healthcare or legal services, and then also able to connect them to different organizations within this Alameda County Care Connect program, is my understanding.
Interesting. I don't know if we have any. I'm trying to think that just does like direct referrals only, but I mean, most of our, like, I think a lot of our like access points and like a lot of the nonprofits, if you talk to the case managers there, then they'll direct you to a lot of these resources. But I can't think of any off the top of my head that does just like an assessment, and then we'll refer you out to different like mental health and community resources, except for the access points that kind of do that.
Access points?
Yeah, for coordinated entry.
What
for
would
kind of
you
like the
say?
gateway into the homeless.
What would you say is a need in San Francisco? Like, what interventions can we implement? That
Yeah,
are
so when you
needed?
were telling me about like how you wanted to have a behavioral health focus, and I'm just like trying to think like how that or where that will fit in to like what the existing resources are at the moment. And I will say one thing, I do think clinical case management services are needed. We have a lot of behavioral health services. The clinical case management services are pretty expensive. And it's a pretty tough job when you can just go get one at Kaiser Permanente. And it's not as difficult. I hate to say that, but it's pretty, it's a hard fact. Like clinical case managers, LCSWs are expensive for nonprofits to have, even with the city, you know, it's expensive, and it is a lot easier and less stressful to go get a job where you can work virtually, or no shade to the people that are doing that. I know many of them, but like when you can go to Kaiser Permanente or a hospital or something and provide a different level of service to folks. So that was like the first thing that came to my mind. Is I was like, well, I hope Dr. Lingle is giving them more than $350,000 to do this program, because she'll be able to hire one staff. Does she still give you only 350?
I think so. How much was it?
I'm gonna email her and be like, girl, what's the inflation rate here? Like, come on, we've got
75.
she raised it only 25. Okay, I have to talk to her, because there's not one program that I manage that serves people that has that low of a budget, just to say.
We will
Plus,
pass
if you
the
were going with
message.
300, I will. When I remember when we were doing ours, I was like, Dr. Lingle, can we pretend like we did some development work and then somebody gave us a $200,000 grant? Because that's what I would do. I would not start a program with 350. I would get more money and then start something. But as for gaps, like gaps in services, or just trying to think what I've recently seen or heard. I think just like with what I've heard from a lot of the providers that I work with. So unfortunately, I don't work as much direct service anymore, but I do work with the organizations that do. And one thing actually, that now that I say that, if you could figure out a way to get people documents ready, you would win a gold medal, I swear. So a lot of HUD funded organization or programs, they need an ID, they need a social security card, they need all this stuff. Actually, like to rehouse out of the SIP, they've requested that organizations decrease their documentation that they need to accept people into the housing or the units. However, like sometimes that's actually required by HUD. And so they don't have room to not do that. But very often somebody doesn't have a copy of their ID, or somebody doesn't have their ID, or they've lost it, or it gets stolen. Who carries around like pay stubs or even their social security letter, like because they need to verify their income, like these Section 8 vouchers, emergency housing vouchers. They need either an ID, a passport, social security card. If you have kids, you have to have a social security card for every kid. So like that is a huge barrier to housing for a lot of people. Even in scattered site, we get to like lower our documents needs because we're just working with landlords a lot of times, but you at least need an ID. Like you can't, I mean, unless you're renting a room, sometimes they don't ask for an ID, but you know, a lot of times you at least need that. So that's a huge barrier that we're facing even right now, just trying to get them all for the SIP hotels. And And same with emergency housing voucher program. So that's one. I don't know if it's necessarily a gap, but it's just been an ongoing problem since I've been working in this field.
So what do they,
Maybe
what
you
do they
could, like-
do? They have to go to the Social Security, like they have to actually go to DMV and get an ID?
Yep, get a new one. They have yellow sheets to get free. They have, they used to be yellow. I don't know if they are anymore, but they have like sheets that if you get it signed by a nonprofit, then you can get a free ID.
Okay.
So you don't have to pay for it, but you have to get one of those sheets. That means you have to go to a nonprofit, get one, then go somewhere else. So, but I mean, now they're not giving IDs out like to you. You get a slip of paper and then you'll get it sent in the mail. Well, that's cool. Where do you get your mail?
Mhm.
I mean, there are also nonprofits that, you know, have mailboxes. Project Homeless Connect, I think, gets a lot of stuff mailed for them. My old office used to get a bunch of mail, you know, and people would stop by and like pick it up, but it still is just like, how often do you go pick it up and things like that. So,
Mhm.
it's almost like you need like just like a filing system or, but then I was just trying to think of like other services. Currently, right now, there's a lot of, I think substance use. A lot of substance use in the SIP hotels that I've heard, have not seen firsthand, I will say that. So that's kind of, I think, another barrier, at least, that a lot of organizations have had to, you know, handle or just kind of confront with trying to house individuals that are, you know, using substances, trying to house someone, because San Francisco is a housing first city. You know, we don't ask them to get, you know, clean or sober before they get housing. It's kind of the opposite. Then we'll continue to house them if they are using, but still, if someone's using to a degree that, you know, makes them unstable or unable to communicate, things like that, then makes it a little bit difficult. So,
Very interesting.
you know who you should talk to also is Cedric. Has Dr. Lingle introduced you to Cedric?
No, Cedric?
He's
Yeah.
working as the clinical, oh man, what's his title now? He was in a cohort with me for NSBH and then also got his NPH, I think, at the end too. But he's the clinical associate director or maybe director, I don't know. At now it's Community Forward. It used to be CATS, but I'm happy to introduce you. But he does a lot of work, obviously, on the, if you're going behavioral health with your project, it's he works on the clinical side. He works with women, so they have a program that's called A Woman's Place. And that's how I kind of am associated with that organizations. But they have a senior center, they have a women's drop-in center, they have a women's substance use and do clinical services for anyone identifying as female.
And you said it's called Community Forward?
Mhm.
Okay. Yeah, that would be awesome, Cricket. If you can, that would be great. Just do a
Yeah.
quick introduction for us.
Just trying to, one more thing, with behavioral health services, I know that like Westside, it's called Westside Community Services. If I'm thinking of the right one. Maybe it's behavioral health. They have Westside Community Services. They're in Soma, I think it's like on 11th Street. They have a clinic, and it's kind of a drop-in clinic, but also you can go in and shower. They're one of the only places that still takes walk-in for behavioral health services.
Okay.
Like when I was giving, providing direct service work, like a lot of times, like if I was providing case management services to someone who was, potentially decompensated or even using, the only place that I ever found that I could get a walk-in, like this person needs services now without like calling an emergency hotline or something, was that place. But they also offer showers, behavioral health services. And I just heard, I have only worked with one person there ever, but from everyone that I ever have talked to, they have really great services as well. So you can do some research on them as far as like the behavioral health side.
Okay. Well, Cricket, thank you so much for your time. It's already almost been an hour and you gotta go eat something other than a donut.
Right?
Even though a donut sounds delicious, I might go eat one after this. Christina, Teresa, Humira, do you guys have any last comments or questions for Cricket?
No questions, but just thank you so much for your time and helping us navigate through this project.
Mhm.
It's really great to connect with you, and thanks so much for supporting us. I appreciate it.
Mhm.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah,
looking
thank you so
forward
much.
to hearing. I'm excited.
Thank you
Maybe
so
she'll
much
let
for your
me come
time.
to the- Maybe she'll let me come to the presentation. I'm gonna ask. I'm also gonna
I'll
email her
invite you.
immediately and be like, yes, please do. Please do. That was my favorite. I'm also gonna email her and tell her that I can't believe she's only giving you $375,000.
Yes, please
Yeah.
do that.
I actually
You're gonna
have
serve like 10 people. Go ahead.
I do have one question. Just because you've done the project and you've gone through the class, do you have like any advice for us?
I would say like have fun because it's just a class project. I feel like I took a lot of my school a little bit too serious. I like spend so much time on school. Any advice? Yeah, I think it is like have fun. You guys have to make like a video or like a slideshow or something.
At the end.
PowerPoint
Have fun,
videos are like
yeah.
extra points. Yeah.
Oh yeah. So use Prezi. I recently used Prezi and it was like the easiest thing to build out. You get to hit push play. You can like record your own voice. Like the presentation that I used, like had other people record from afar and then used it. But Prezi was, I just used it. It was really easy. You can like also put music to it and stuff. But yeah, I think just have fun. Don't take it as serious. But that presentation part, like at the end, like everyone's so tired at the end of the semester, right? But at least if you can make people laugh with your presentation, I think that's a win, right? So, but yeah, if I come up with any better thoughts, I feel like that's a really bad advice to give.
No, that's great. Thank you,
Well,
Cricket. You
You guys
provided
only have
us with a lot of knowledge.
350K. That's
No, you definitely have calmed the nerves a little bit. I feel like we've been a little stressed and going in a lot of different directions, but this is really helpful. So thank you.
Yes.
yeah. I think also like if you wanted to sometimes they said don't narrow it this much, but if you wanted to narrow it down, like even more to like provide single adult males with behavioral health services, I think there's a lot of research, at least in the Latin community around males and getting those services. Because if I remember correctly from some of my reading and research, they're like behavioral health services are really frowned upon in that community, at least from a male perspective. And accessing those tends to make you, I mean, across all male populations, or demographics, you're looked at as weaker if you are depressed or can't provide for your family and all those things. So like, even I think if you wanted to narrow it down, I think that at least helps your focus on like what to do next, right? You just gotta, once we picked our population, it was like, then we were good, right? We were golden and we kind of ran with it. We did veterans, we did a peer like advocate for veterans and substance use.
Oh,
So
wow.
we even narrowed it down even more. I can remember they were like, "You're narrowing this down so much." I'm like, "You only gave us 300K. Like, what else are we supposed to do?" These are 10 people with this. Yeah, so I think that one other thing just to add to this that I think a lot of times I didn't think about in the MSBH program was workforce development.
Okay.
Workforce development and housing go hand in hand if you're going to pay for it to some degree, right? Like a lot of them have. I'm actually working on a project like this right now. Office of Economic and Workforce Development has a pretty large pot of money that is supposed to be tied to rapid rehousing, which is a time-limited subsidy. So when they exit, the idea is in 12 to 24 months, they can afford their rent on their own. So there's workforce development services tied to that. And so what type of workforce development services do we need to be able to get these individuals like back into the workforce, making a livable wage, things like that. If you had a larger pot of money, I'd tell you to create a shallow subsidy program or something. But, so like that's another thing is workforce development services. So.
Oh, wow. Sounds really good. That was a good one.
Not to like take you away from your behavioral health, sorry.
We're all over the place. We just want to solve it all. Thank you so much.
Yeah, same.
There's just so much. It's so complex. It's so much to unpack.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, well, I look forward to seeing your project. Feel free to reach out if you have any questions, shoot me an email. Happy to answer or come attend a class or something.
Thank you, Cricket.
All right.
We're going to put in a
Thank you
good.
so much.
Thank
All
you.
right. Have a good night. Thanks.
Too.
Bye.
You too. Bye.